psycho killer. Qu'est-ce que c'est?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Book Nook. I'm here with Ash Bishop to talk about The Horoscope Writer, a murder mystery. It was such a fun read. Welcome, Ash.
Thanks, Jordan. Good to see you again. Good to be back.
Yeah, last time we talked about a very different type of book, so I'm excited to get our teeth sunk into this one. But before we get started, let's start with you. Tell me about yourself, and since this book is called The Horoscope Writer, what is your horoscope? Oh, sorry, what is your astrological sign?
Sure. So I'm an author. This is my second book. My first novel was a science fiction novel called Intergalactic Exterminators. We talked about that. It won a couple of major awards, so I was excited about that. And so I immediately shifted genres. And now I'm writing a mystery thriller. I have been writing for a long time. I got an MFA in creative writing in 2001. And so it took me, I guess you could say, 21 years to be published, which is both shameful and proud because I never gave up. But having two novels out now is pretty exciting. My astrological sign is Libra. Now, this is the first of many contradictions probably in this interview, but I don't actually believe in astrology at all. Yet, Libra is perfect for me because it's about the scales and it's about balance. And I have this like really strong sense of moderation and this sense of trying to find the thing that other people like. If the whole world is zigging, I'm always trying to zag, and not on purpose. It's like just innate in my system. And so I'm basically always on a different wavelength than everyone else.
Love that. So I'm also a Libra. That is such a Libra response to say, oh, I don't really believe in the star signs. However,
Yep. There's a famous quote. What is it? I don't believe in astrology, but I'm a Sagittarius and we're very skeptical people.
exactly. Yeah, whereas we like to weigh both options constantly. I know I have the hardest time deciding what I want to eat.
Yep, absolutely.
So tell me about The Horoscope Writer.
Sure. So it's a high concept mystery thriller. It's about a young man who is working in a newspaper, and it's good timing because he works at a newspaper in San Diego. It's fictional. It's called the San Diego Register. But our San Diego paper, I live in San Diego, the paper just sold and maybe shut down, the San Diego Union Tribune. And so the book is coming out at basically the exact perfect moment because I wanted the newspaper to be in trouble. He basically wants to be a reporter, but it's hard to find work as a reporter, in the world of new media. And so the book is a lot about sort of things fading out and new things being introduced, and the newspaper is representative of that. Now, of course, it's about horoscopes, which are a really ancient type of prophecy, and so some things persist forever. But anyway, to get to the plot, he is writing horoscopes. It's the only thing he can get as per diem job on the newspaper. And he starts to receive them. He starts to get sent these kind of cryptic and sometimes gruesome horoscopes via anonymous email. And he ignores them. In fact, he sort of mocks them. And then they start to come true.
What I really loved about, because it has the potential to go one of two ways, because I mean, in our world, people either really believe in horoscopes or they don't. And I like how when you read it, you show those two perspectives. You have the characters who are so eager to be like, yes, these are 100% real. We're going to go dig up a monument to find $1 million. Like, but then you have these skeptics who are like, well, we're just putting the pattern piece, like puzzle pieces together in our mind and making it true by like filling in the gap. So I love that you also kind of reflected the nature of horoscopes themselves in your book about horoscope murders.
Yeah, and the skeptics don't want to miss out. You know what I mean? If the money really is there, well, hey, we better go start digging.
Well,
At the
exactly.
same time, logic tells them no, it can't possibly be there.
And like you mentioned before, last year we did talk about your first book, Intergalactic Exterminators Inc., and I'll put a link to that video in the bottom and probably somewhere on the screen. Very different genre. How was it shifting genre?
In regards to changing, oh my gosh, the murder mystery was so much easier to write. With the science fiction, you're creating everything. Like every time you want your character to use like a colloquialism, you have to realize, no, that's an alien. They're not going to use a colloquialism. Like I have to change their language, and then they're on a different planet, so all the physics are different, and the customs are going to be different, and so you're essentially creating everything from whole cloth. And I don't want to say exhausting because it's exhilarating, but it's also exhausting. Now with mystery, it's so grounded in reality. Like this takes place in the areas of San Diego that I go daily. And so the setting's already made for me. The character has a lot of my personality and my history. There's a crime at the school where I got my MFA. And so there's a lot of, even though it's not called that, it's called San Diego University, I think, something like that. There's a lot of stuff borrowed from real life, which gives it a certain, I think, authenticity. But it's also by lucky coincidence, just way easier to write.
And that makes so much sense, because I know writing fantasy, it's the same. You really want to be able to say, oh, cool. And you cannot say, oh, cool. You have to, like, how do you express even like basic interaction pieces when a lot of those, like you say, the colloquialisms have to reflect that time period or planet that those people are living on. So yeah, and I love that then means if you're writing in a place that you're familiar with, you really get that, because reading the Horoscope Writer, it really felt like I was visiting a local and they were showing me around, because you had such a nice kind of natural flow to how the characters interacted with the world. Right.
Yeah, and I'm excited about those locations, so it's fun. Like they all have history and they all have meaning to me and meaning to the city, and so it's sort of imbued with a a background that I didn't have to make up, which is really nice. You would hope, speaking to your fantasy conundrum, you would hope that since it's a total fiction, you can say, well, in my world, people say, oh, cool,
Yeah.
But the reader's never okay with that. They have certain standards that they want observed, and you can only stretch those so far.
Exactly, yeah. But then you don't want to go too far the other way, and every other sentence is blood and ashes.
Right. If
no
you've ever
shade
read
to Robert Jordan. Yeah.
if you've ever read fantasy from the 70s and 80s, it's like, oh, this is a slog, because it's so carefully, sewing closely to those traditions. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Oh, that's too funny. And then, so I've always thought that writing a novel set in our current day would be so much harder than kind of even just pre-internet times, because anyone with a smartphone has way too much information at the tip of their fingers. So what role would you say technology plays in your novel, and did you find it helpful, or did you find it hindered the mystery part?
Oh, definitely helpful. Yeah, definitely, because well, for one thing, we have a lot of information at our fingertips, but the problem is we can't filter that information. We don't know what's true and what's not true. And, in the old days, something came out in the newspaper when it was still healthy and striving, and people just believed it. And now it's like we have 5,000 different news sources, and 4,900 of them are I don't want to say corrupt because that's too cynical, but they're sort of something biased, maybe. I guess you could say they're fighting for their readership. We get overloaded with that, and that's exactly what my book's about. Like, some people will take on faith that something's true, and other people will be skeptical no matter what, like even with the truth looking them right in the eyes, or with a fact looking them right in the eyes. And so technology really didn't assist for me on this one, because I'm always trying to kind of capture the cultural zeitgeist, and I feel like that's our current zeitgeist. Like, we just don't know what to think and what to feel and who to trust. And a lot of people can take sides and be like, I'm on this side and you're all wrong. But the Libras among us, the moderates, were like, wait a minute.
The higher thinkers.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe just stubborn. we're thinking, I don't know what's true, like what's going on, what's really happening, and so it's really hard for a person that doesn't want their values to be reflected back to them, but rather wants truth. But what a great setting for a mystery novel, right? I mean, because that is what you're doing in a mystery novel. You're not looking for the murderer who you want it to be a murder. You're looking for the murderer that actually is doing the murdering. So anyway, technology really, really helped me out.
Oh, and that's so interesting. And that's kind of how the book opens, where we have this main character and he wants to put integrity back into the newspaper. And
Right.
it's almost like his first action has to be false, because he gets put on the horoscope kind of docket, and he doesn't believe in horoscopes. So it's
Right.
From the get-go, you've really shown us like, oh, the intention most of the time with most of these journalists is pure, but that doesn't sell papers anymore. And so,
Right.
you
Right.
either kind of compromise on your integrity, but then can afford to pay the bills and hopefully maybe find that integrity down the line.
Right.
Yeah.
And I try to weave that in like all the time. So there's even a moment when they find this Latin phrase and they look it up to get the translation, and it like translates one way that really implicates a certain character, and then it translates another way that doesn't at all. And it's like, but wait a minute, how, what do these words mean? You don't know, because the information is there, but it's just there's too much of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have the Latin translation, you don't have the single Latin translation. You've got a whole bunch of different ones. As an old English teacher, boy, I found that a lot. Whenever a book would be translated, I'd be like, hey, this version, this happens, and that must be this character doing this thing. And then in a different version, same source material, it read differently.
And so what was your favorite horoscope to write?
I don't know. I think my favorite were probably the ones that were goofy. There's a bunch of horoscopes in there that if they do come true, they don't matter at all. Like there's one about a guy that's gonna crack his tooth eating lobster and down in Tijuana, and like maybe that happened, but who cares? Right?
Did you have a scene that was the most challenging to write?
Ooh, all of the crimes. There's blood all over the cover.
Yeah.
And some folks will read this. In fact, even my mom, she read it and she skipped to the end. She said she got so nervous for the characters' lives, I guess, for their fates, that she skipped to the end to read and make sure that they were okay. It is hard to write some of those bigger crimes. Like you can be like there's one where a man is killed by a wild animal, and he's got like a son, and there's all this stuff. And as an empathetic person, I was like, oh, this is so horrible. Like, make it not have happened. I have the power to make it not happen. But it's a murder mystery, so you need stakes. You need sad things to happen. You need things people don't want to happen. So the investigator has a quest to uncover the truth, and that quest matters. So anyway, I would say all of the crime was probably the hardest. But overall, the book flowed like very naturally. This was the first one that I wrote without a lot of assistance. I didn't use a lot of secondary readers. My agent didn't really weigh in on it. She was just happy with it. And so it's kind of neat in the sense that it's all me, and not influenced by other voices saying, well, we need this or we need that. So I'm proud of it in that sense. And it made the writing easier, to answer your question.
Well, and you should both be proud of it, but also probably happy that the hardest part for you to write was the stuff that would make you a bad person if it was easy to write. So so that's a good thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I know I was very like, there are some, and I don't want to give too much away because it's more fun to read along, but there were some crimes that ended up happening that had to happen, but there were a few crimes that didn't quite happen the way the horoscope said they would, that I was very thankful for, because it was like, okay, human nature is actually not this dark, twisted, horrible place all the time. Like, kindness does win out, and I think that was really cool.
Yeah, and I also wanted to make a point that like we jump to conclusions. We think that it is dark and twisted. Like we're so quick to believe in the spectacular,
Mhm.
uh, and sort of not put ourselves in those circumstances, not extend our own humanity to those people because we declare them criminals, and so automatically we can kind of dehumanize them. But if we're wrong, then we've made a big mistake. And so yeah, I wanted to kind of I guess turn the tide on the reader a little bit. It's not the so-called criminals that are the bad people exactly. It's the reader making their assumptions that these things have happened because they maybe lack faith in humanity, or they're just really good at making other people or at jumping to conclusions about other people,
Mhm.
believing the worst. So anyway, yeah, I agree. Like some of the crimes I just couldn't do, but it really fed into my uh, theme because the theme isn't about crime exactly. It's about sort of planting a seed of an idea and then chasing that idea. The same thing that horoscopes do for us every time we read them.
Mhm. And
Yeah,
it did also, as a reader, it did help flip some of the kind of cliches you expect to follow through when you read a crime mystery
yeah,
novel, because there are so many of those tropes that they tend to
yeah.
always include, like a double cross and all of these things. But because you subverted a lot of those expectations, it felt very fresh. And I know there was a moment where I was like, oh, I actually don't think I know what's going to happen.
Right.
Which is what you want to feel when you're reading a mystery.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to weave in all those red herrings. And so the best thing I could do was to destabilize everything. Like nothing you know is true, or nothing you can't be sure of anything.
Mhm.
Uh, and so that was the best way to do that. But even so, like I still feel like I could have done a better job hiding the killer. Whatever.
I mean, that's for the sequel, right?
Sure, sure.
And also, like, you knew who the killer was from the get-go, but the reader does not.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I have a much greater frame of reference. So for
Mhm.
me, it feels like a small clue is actually a huge clue. Yeah, that's
And
fair.
so, what advice would you give to authors wanting to write kind of a whodunit novel?
Oh, okay. So I'm a pantser instead of a plotter, and that really doesn't work with mystery thrillers. So for this one, I had to set up the plot first, and that was fun because it was a new experience for me. You know, with my other novels, I've tried to sort of capture the vitality of what's the right word? Improvisation, where things are happening. You know, like you give your characters personalities, you give them conflicts, you give them obstacles to overcome, and wants and desires to try and achieve, and then you stick them together in a bowl and they fight. And That's what I've always done, and it's created, I think, these really sort of alive novels full of energy. Can't do that with mystery. You know, you just can't because you've got to lay the foundation for all these different things and these moments when things change and these moments when you realize that the direction you were going is not the direction that you thought you were going. And so my advice would be, even if you are a pantser like me, you still gotta write that plot out. You know, you still have to plan each character's sort of arc beforehand, not no matter how much I wanted to, not after the novel had started.
That, yeah, and that makes sense, because then also, like you say, you can weave those pieces in before the reader is cluing into them
Right.
much more effectively if you know what those pieces are. That
Oh
makes
yeah,
sense.
the best mysteries you read them a second time and you're like, oh, I missed all this, you know, because it's really fun to see that the answer was there. You just didn't see it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, apart from the main character also being a Libra, was there any kind of uh something like a Easter egg or something that you nerd out over, or just a piece of yourself that you put in the novel that maybe people wouldn't pick up on?
Sure. Well, I think they probably pick up on this, but you know, I was an English teacher for a long time, and so I've got one of the characters that's you know, very well read, and he's excited about what he reads, and so it was really fun to sort of take, you know, I taught Sir Gawain in the Green Knight for like 10 years, And so it was really fun to revisit something that I loved and had a pretty generous amount of knowledge about, and weave it into the character. And so he's not only enjoying Sir Gawain and talking about it and thinking about it, but he also is like reenacting it in a like sort of nerdy, sort of fun way. So anyway, that stuff was pretty fun. My background as a big fan of English literature really came into play a lot in the book. And actually I ended up cutting a lot of it out because I just got too into it, and I was like, okay, people don't care about this except you, except me. So anyway, I cut a lot of it out, but that, and then the Kepler thing was really fun, even though I'm not a big fan of, I'm not a big historian for science history. It was so exciting to read all the books I read on Kepler and kind of start to understand, to tell you about it real quick. He exists at a junction point when basically astrology is beginning to mold with astronomy. People are looking for, and theology. So people are looking to the stars to try and discern God's plan. They're not thinking they're going to tell the future. They're thinking God's up there and he's gonna like move the stars around to help me understand what he has planned for the universe or for the world. And so boy, what an interesting time, right? When those two things were together. And so it was really nerdy and fun to think about Kepler and to add him to the text.
Oh, very cool. And can you share a favorite quote or a favorite passage?
Sure. So we already kind of referenced this a little bit, but this is the scene so one of the horoscopes is that $250,000 will be buried, not hidden, buried in a very specific place in a park in San Diego. And so anyway, I'll read just a tiny bit from this section. Oh, I'm sorry. So the detective has showed up because he knows what's going to happen, and he's kind of just waiting to try and control the situation. The first person appeared at exactly 5:15. It was a man in his early 30s. He strode toward the cross with purpose, a metal detector strapped to his back, a long rusty shovel resting against his shoulder. He buried the shovel blade into the firm dirt 6 feet east of the cross. He was followed exactly 60 seconds later by a pair of teenagers, one still in her pajamas. They were carrying a gardening shovel and a hand trowel. 30 seconds after they arrived, a housewife parked illegally and climbed out of her car, face red, hair bouncing in curlers. She carried her shovel across her left forearm. When the 6th, 7th, and 8th carful arrived, Leslie radioed for backup and called LePere down to help him. By the time LePere had hiked down the hilltop, 26 more cars and roughly 200 people had gathered around the cross, many of them holding various types of metal instruments. Nobody take another step closer, Leslie told them. We're done digging up the park today. The young couple wearing pajamas ignored him completely, the man stabbing his hand shovel deep into the dirt. One by one, the others followed. Can we shoot them for digging? LePere asked Leslie. I don't even think it's against the law, Leslie said. So anyway, that's and it gets worse from there, right? But if you learn that $500,000 or $250,000 is buried in a park, go dig. I would do the same. So even if it was a horoscope that told me to do it.
Yeah, because on the off chance that it's real, you want to be the person who dug for $250,000.
That's right. There's an old famous philosopher, Pasquale, and he says that we should believe in God. He says, because if we die and we're wrong, it doesn't matter. And if we die and we're right, then it's really important. And so his sort of he was logically creating this wager condition that's really exactly like the horoscopes. Like, what if it's true? Let's go dig.
Yeah. That's a man who wants to be on the winning side. I like it.
That's right.
And so what projects do you have coming up next?
So I'm writing a sequel to Intergalactic Exterminators. It's called Constellation Reclamation Corporation. I stayed with the sort of long titles with lots of, with a mouthful of repeating vowel and consonant sounds. And it's basically about a side job that my hero Russ takes on as a Intergalactic refuse control. I guess he's a trash man. And so the story changes a little bit, even though the other central character, Anina, is still working as an exterminator. The main character is now a trash man, and we go from there.
And will my favorite character, Applebottom, be in the sequel as well?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Perfect.
he's actually really important. In fact, if I make it a trilogy, I was thinking about calling it the Chrome Man trilogy. So he's still a very big part of it.
Fantastic. That's my whole ruse of this interview was just to find that out. So thank you very much.
You got it out of me.
I finally. But thank you so much, Ash, for joining me today. What I'll do is I'll put the links to your website and where you can find a copy of the Horoscope Writer, which is out July 18th, right?
Yes, 6 days from now.
6 days from now. So definitely pre-order your copy so that it'll show up on the day. It is such a good read, a good summer read, and maybe, check your horoscope.
Yep, if it says buy a good book, definitely go for this one.
Psycho killer